Yeah, the market is certainly stabilized, and I think we are on a modest economic recovery. We've got over 4, 5, 6 economic indicators pretty good in terms of leading economic recoveries, and they're all showing some signs of green. You know, you've got consumer confidence. It bottomed out toward the end of last year. Purchasing Managers Index. We've got jobless claims coming down, and also the yield curve is pretty steep. So those are just a couple, but you know, in general, improving environment.
Are you concerned that in order to get out of the recession that we have robbed a little bit, specifically looking at the auto industry, from next year's sales to some degree with the Cash for Clunkers program, with the stimulus plan? I mean, that money will have been spent certainly by the first quarter of next year. We're thinking stimulus money. Are you afraid that that's going to hurt the bottom line next year, especially later next year?
Not really, and the reason is that because of the information technology, when people started realizing that the program was a possibility, they stopped buying and trading in those potentially clunker eligible vehicles. So we estimated, at least 200 to maybe 250,000 vehicles, people were postponing their purchase. So even before the program started, we had a lot of people sort of with pent-up demand. So I think we'll see some decline in sales when the program's over, to be sure. No question about that. But when you're selling into an environment that seems to be improving and you have a little tailwind, that's always a good place to be. So we'll get a little payback, could be, over an extended period of time, because some of those trade-in vehicles, they could have been on the road for another 2 or 3 years.
How well positioned has Ford been in this Cash for Clunkers program?
Fantastic. I mean, we've got, as you've probably seen from the Department of Transportation, 2 of the top 10 vehicles in the program in terms of what people are buying. The Focus is practically sold out. I mean, dealers are looking for more. Also the Escape has done very well. The Fusion in Milan are also eligible. And we've had people buying F-150s because, as you know, the program does help finance those work trucks as well. So it's been just fantastic. We wish we had more Focuses out there, but the program's still going, and people can go and order the vehicle and also get the rebate.
Taking a look at, Ford made the decision, and obviously you were in on those discussions as well, not to go the same route as your other domestic U.S. competitors, file for bankruptcy, and obviously didn't need to do so, was able to raise the cash to stay afloat during the tough times, especially the first half of this year. Talk about what that means for you, not so much in 2009, but 2010, 2011, and not just domestically in the United States. Does it make any difference internationally from an image perspective?
Well, I'm not going to comment about the bankruptcy itself, but what I will say is that Ford has been on a restructuring path for several years, and it is a lot of hard work. We have everyone pitching in globally, and you're right to point out we are global. We are in Europe, we are in Asia Pacific, we've been in Latin America for decades. And what we've done over the last several years is attempt to consolidate a lot of operations so that we've got, for example, one Focus platform or a few platforms that allow us to get much better revenue per unit of cost as we produce those vehicles. So you may have seen, for example, this morning the Small Business Administration report about the fact that people are buying our Transit Connect, which we're bringing over from Europe, and we can barely keep them on the dealer lots for 5 or 7 days, and they're already sold. So we're doing that very effectively, and we will continue to do that. The other area I just want to quickly point out is that we've now achieved quality that matches Toyota across all our vehicle lines. A lot of people don't know that out there. We've got just fantastic quality, and we're achieving best in class in terms of fuel economy over time. And all that is really bringing people to buy Ford.
And that brings us to this international story, because clearly Ford has been an international business for many years. In fact, I think it's 2 years ago I was in St. Petersburg. There's a Ford plant that I would pass in St. Petersburg, and a popular brand, at least in that part of Russia. When you look at the international positioning, because that is really more important for the long run, it's not the big three. So many folks in the U.S. were conditioned to think the big three, but we're talking about not only the big international competitors like the Toyotas of the world, but domestic brands too that are in each of the markets. When we look at the BRICS, the Brazil, Russia, India, and China markets, how difficult is that to manage both the domestic competitors that may have some political advantage, and of course the other big international competitors that you have here in the United States?
I'm glad you asked that, because that's exactly the kind of approach that we take in terms of how challenging that is to be competitive and effective in each of those markets. But point of fact, we have been. If you look at the Brazilian market as a case in point, we've been there for many years. We're selling the EcoSport down there, which is a small, kind of a compact CUV crossover, and we have been gaining market share over the last 4 years. We've done very well in Europe over this time, so I know there's a lot of focus here on the domestic automakers, but we've actually made significant improvements in those other marketplaces as well at the same time that we've done the restructuring here. So yes, it's challenging, it's a lot of work, but we're really firing on all cylinders.
Because the growth engine is really international. It really is. It's, you're going to speak of today.
That's right.
It is the BRICS. And then beyond that, the other emerging or frontier markets. But that's a ways away. There's a lot to do to capture these emerging markets right now. What do they want? I know that we're talking about 4 nations that are very different, regions within these big countries that are very different. But is it fuel economy? What is it that they want right now?
Well, it does vary from market to market, because you know the fuel backdrop is very different in Brazil as compared to Russia or India or China, just as 4 examples. And what we're seeing is demand for fuel economy and a recognition that we have to get to a more sustainable place in terms of personal mobility. So we do see that trend emerging, certainly in Europe because of the CO2 targets that they already have in place. But we're also seeing signs of that in those other emerging markets. And we know that China, for example, at some point will begin to address that environmental aspiration they've been talking about for many years. So we're poised to really be very sensitive to that and to make sure that we're moving ahead and just getting to best in class in terms of fuel economy and safety, another winner for Ford.
Is safety an issue you hear them clamoring for in these emerging markets? What is it, and again, acknowledging that they're very different, but is there a common theme that you see in what the demand is, or it's very different?
It's very different. I mean, when you go to China, you see demand for what we call the C or the D car, which is a much larger car than what you would expect. And some of that is because they've had fuel subsidies, so people like that, and they like the bigger vehicles. In contrast, in India, you know what's happening with the nano car. I mean, they want small and tiny. They want something that's affordable. So those other features of the vehicle are not as important, and they just want something that they can own and drive without going on mass transit.